Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Top Cyber Pro podcast. I'm founder and CEO of TopCyberPro.com, Jim West, and we have a wonderful guest. I always say we have a wonderful guest, but this guest is truly unique because this is one of the first major recruiters slash founders of some interesting events. He does a lot actually, but I'm gonna let him introduce himself, and we're gonna have one of these very I would say it's almost the first time we've actually had this kind of conversation on Top Cyber Pro podcast, which is really about what are some red flags on resumes? What are some green flags? What are the key things that the market and industry is looking for in this space? And just to get some insight and perspective from a global recruiter. And here can you please introduce yourself? I'm sorry, my brain just kind of went on the
Yeah,
fritz there.
no worries, Jim. So firstly, thanks very much for bringing me on. So very briefly, my name is Charles Wroth. I go by Angus Red in the security community. I've been a technical security recruiter for about 9.5, almost 10 years now. Before this, I was a high-risk security consultant working predominantly in East and West Africa and the Middle East, doing bodyguarding, anti-piracy, and working on mines and oil and gas. And before that, I was a paratrooper in the British Airborne for 6 years, doing two tours of Afghanistan. Thank you. And yeah, over the last 9.5, 10 years, I've recruited everything pretty much from pen testing to red teaming, threat intel, DFIR, vuln research, exploit dev, security architecture. I've dabbled in a bit of developers and sales, but that predominantly had to be related to a security company or product.
Mhm.
Um, that has mostly been the United States, here in South Africa, where I currently live and I was raised, and then also in the EU and a little bit in the United Kingdom. I've dabbled in other areas like Australia, New Zealand, and Asia, but it wasn't really a great fit for me. And yeah, I'm quite involved in the community. I do as much as I can. I'm currently the co-chair of B-Sides Cape Town. We've been going, this is I think our 13th year. I
Wow.
volunteered for 3 years with B-Sides Orlando. When COVID happened, I took full advantage of, remote conferences. So with that, I volunteered with the DEF CON Red Team Village, DEF CON Blue Team Village, the Career Hacking Village, um, Circle City Con, and a few other conferences. And then, yeah, the last thing is I started a community pretty much right before COVID started off, called Hack South. I remember we got excited when we had about 50 members, hosted on Discord. And currently we stand on about 2,500 members, with a lot of
Wow.
industry experts here in South Africa. And then more importantly, a lot of students and people that honestly, some of them have just heard the word cybersecurity and they're curious and they need to find answers, and we bring them in and try segment them into the different areas they're interested in and try get them the answers that they're looking for.
Well, I love everything you just said there, but I want to go back to something you said really early on when you was mentioning your service in the military, Afghanistan, and so forth. But one of the words you mentioned anti-piracy, and so I want to kind of
Yeah,
clarify. When the technical people hear anti-piracy, we think like DVDs, copying movies, downloading
yeah,
illegal software. But I think because of your military background, you might be referring to like pirates and trying
yeah,
to take over ships, right?
yeah. Like, oh yeah. So you're thinking about you wouldn't steal a car.
Yeah.
No. Uh, it also makes me think like when I left the military and I went to my educational officer. As part of my transition getting out, you have to go see someone and they ask you about your future and they try to give you some advice. And I sat down with him and he said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "No, I want to go into private military contracting because it felt like the most natural evolution for me."
Hmm.
And the it was a very old major looked at me and he's like, "Why don't you become a carpenter or a bricklayer?" And I very plainly said to him, "So I'm not a guy that works with his hands. I know I'm an infantier now, but I'd like to use my mind more." And whenever you mention private military contracting, it was just like a non. It looked like I'm frozen.
Oh, that's okay. Just continue. I can hear you.
Oh, okay. So it became a non-discussion. So from there, I built a community centered around helping veterans like me getting out and helping them get into the private military industry. And with that came anti-piracy. Back then in 2011, 2012, the hostile they call it the high risk zone. Used to be quite big around Africa. Obviously, in recent years, it's reduced quite considerably. Um, and so yeah, I got into the anti-piracy game. Did my ship security officers course, my port facility security officers course, company security officers course, all the survival courses. And then my first job wasn't even in anti-piracy.
All right, we're back. We had some technical difficulties, but we're going to get right back to it. So you was last talking about doing some anti-piracy, which is combating real pirates, and we hear about these stories all the time. People have seen the YouTube videos of like the big hoses of water trying to like defend the ships, and it's scary because these folks are got weapons and they do sometimes board ships. So did you have any
Yeah.
stories from that period of time, or was it
Yeah.
mostly?
No, two things. So right when I left the army, I actually got an offer from an American company using offshore flag vessels, which is very common. And I had got the contract, I had signed it, and I was ready to go. It wasn't a great offer, but basically between looking for work and this period, like the industry had not collapsed, but there was a lot less demand. And right in that moment, one of my old sergeant majors actually offered me a job in Sierra Leone where I went to go work on a an inshore port for about a year. And I went to Sierra Leone, all good in the hood. I didn't sign the contract with this American company. And 3 months later, I heard the friend of mine that had helped me get the job there was sitting in prison in India, in Chennai.
Oh,
And him and his compatriots were they sat in prison, I think, for 2, 3 years on firearms offenses in international, well, in local waters. So it
in
was a
local
big
waters.
debacle. So I dodged a bullet there. And the only piracy incident I had is after I left Sierra Leone, I got a job in Mozambique, in the northern part of Mozambique, in a place called Papel. No, in a place called Pemba.
Okay.
It's one of the largest natural bays in Africa, and it's the most northern one in Mozambique, on your way towards the Tanzanian border. And what we were basically doing is we had escort vessels, and we were patrolling around a deep sea drilling vessel, doing exploration. And the one night we saw some flashing in the distance, and bearing in mind it's pitch black
Yeah.
in the middle of the ocean, and the flashing wasn't like a buoy. Like usually you can pick up how that looks. It was almost like flaring. And we decided to go take a look, and I woke up the team leader and whatnot, and we had a Mozambican Fusilerios, which is Mozambican Special Forces, with us. So we had about 6 members with PKMs, AKs, and then one sergeant. Anyway, we went to investigate, and we found a skiff with I think 4 members on it. And what they had done is they had taken one of their oars. They had tied a life jacket on it, poured petrol on it, and set it alight to try flag us down. It took us 3 days to figure out what language they spoke. In the end, we figured out it was French. And long story short, they were from the Comores. So if you pull up a map and you look at it, they were fishing inshore, so within 2 miles of the Comores Islands.
Oh,
They had twin engine failure, no GPS, no flares, no radio, no radar,
wow. So they
and
got lucky.
they floated 140 nautical miles over 12 days. And then they managed to catch us because this drilling vessel we have is such a high tower with such bright lights. And then yeah, we took them back to Pemba. They were then deported back to the Comores. And
Hmm.
I think if you go Google Maps, you still see a little skiff in the Pemba port. But yeah, that was the only major incident we really had.
Wow, but that's an interesting story, right? You never know
Yeah, yeah,
how these things turn out. Thank you for sharing that with me because it was like a small part of your introduction, and I was like, I have to ask about the anti-piracy. But let's get back
yeah,
to the main reason why we're having this discussion because you recruit for a lot of highly skilled roles, right? So
yeah.
can you give us let's start with like what are some of the roles you're like let's do like a running list of what are some of the titles of the roles that you tried to fill for various companies, organizations, etc.
Okay, so more recently, a lot of my work has been predominantly here in South Africa. So I've been recruiting senior security architects. I've been recruiting senior pen testers, which is quite hard to do in South Africa because of we have a massive sort of talent attrition at the senior level. when it comes to offensive security. I've been looking for heads of MXDR. I've been looking for SOC analysts, and then vulnerability researchers for companies in Europe. In the US, it's typically security engineers, product security engineers, offensive security engineers, red team engineers, and then just sort of general pen testers.
Hmm. And so
Yeah,
with these roles, what are like if I had to say, obviously, there's a whole debate in the industry about what's more valuable, degrees, certifications, and experience. And
yeah.
I'll just give you my opinion up front. I believe experience trumps everything. If someone's got their hands dirty, they got direct experience, that has a lot of value and weight for me. But obviously, when I look at a degree versus a certification, now I'll take a step back. There's a lot of programs that do both, that'll have like
Yeah.
WGU and other like EC Council has a degree program where there's certifications in the track. So not only are you getting an accredited degree, you're getting a few certifications along the way. So I do believe but to me, experience is number one, and then two, certifications, because it does give you a degree of knowledge in that a body of knowledge related to the
Mm,
subject, right? But
yeah.
for you, when you're having to fill these positions, what's the industry looking for? Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what I say or what I think, what anybody thinks. What is the industry looking for and paying for?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and I get asked it a lot. And I base every one of these type of questions and answers based on my own experience and the experience I've had working with companies and also with other recruiters and what they see is working and what's not working. So unfortunately, like with anything in security, the answer is it depends. The way I look at it is in two parts. So if we dumb it down and look at the journey it takes from where you are now, whether that be unemployed or in a current job and looking to get a new job, the process typically is, unless you've got a good friend at this new company and they put in a word and you get there on their favor, is you get a resume together, you apply for the job, you do interviews, you do background checks, you get hired. Sometimes there's other stuff involved, technical tests, psychometrics, behavioral assessments, but one of the key components is your resume. And when it comes to that, I think most people that are failing to land interviews uh, are failing to get their resume right. Now, to answer your question more directly, in my experience, I typically think in cybersecurity, there's four things that sell us. There's your education, your certifications, your experience, and what you do in the security community. Now, we have to once again remember a resume doesn't get you a job. A resume gets you an interview, and interviews and a tech test, if there is one, gets you the job.
Hmm.
So we have to make sure we have the most optimized possible resume when we send it over because I don't get that many applications on my jobs, but I know some agencies and some companies that get thousands of applications, especially now in America with all the mass layoffs. Some companies are posting a security engineering job and getting 10, 12,000 applications. If you think about it, a recruiter probably allocates, an hour or 2 hours a day to go through those resumes. You've got seconds to basically give them a reason not to move to the next person.
Hmm.
So I do deep assessments of people's resumes, but when it comes to those four things, education, that is purely your college or your university. In certifications, that's certifications.
Hmm.
And there's, different certifications hold different weight in different companies with defense companies, with the government, and in the sort of in the private sector. Um, your experience there, you have to think about the brand identity and the brand awareness of the companies you're working for. Not so much on who you're working for now, but when you make that next move, you need to think about the brand that you're joining and how that looks on your resume.
Hmm.
If you look at a pen tester from a company that has three pen testers, and you look at a pen tester that comes from, for argument's sake, Google. Obviously, the Google pen testers probably worked at a much higher level than
Hmm.
than than someone from a, no offense, but a mom and pop shop. And then the last thing is security community engagement. Now, once again, reminding us the key is to get an interview from the job. So, for instance, on my resume, I got two bursaries to go to university, and I decided to not take them and go join the military in a foreign country. So I don't have my education is lasting on my resume. My experience is pretty good, so it's pretty high up there. My certifications are not quite relevant to cybersecurity. It's something I'm working on at the moment. I've chosen the IC2 route.
Hmm.
And then what sells me best and what's going to get me an interview somewhere is what I do in the community. Because when you open my resume, in the first half of page one is B-Sides Cape Town, DEF
Hmm.
CON, B-Sides Orlando, the Many Hats Club, all these different things I've done, the talks I've given, the workshops I've given, and people see that, and it's a point. I still need to figure out it's a real word. Point of commonality. People see this and they go, "Oh, this person's one of us."
Hmm.
I get it a lot when I speak to candidates and I give them my introduction, and they go, "Oh, so you're not just a recruiter?" And I'm like, "Well, I got to pay the bills,
Yeah.
but I have a real deep passion for this industry."
Mhm.
So when it comes to structuring your resume, you want to almost put those things in that order. So think about what sells you best and put it in that order. If you come from a good sort of, I don't know, tech related university, Palo Alto, Georgia Tech, MIT, those kind of universities, we maybe put it up top. If we are looking for an offensive security related job, pen testing, red teaming, and you have OffSec certs, AltaTech certs, maybe we prioritize that over, a bachelor's degree.
Mhm.
It all adds value, but the key is if you think about when you look for housing, when you look for a house, and I think Americans use Zillow,
Yeah.
Okay, so when you're looking for a prospective house, and you can imagine you being the one selling that house, you're never gonna look at your bathroom or your restroom and think, you know what, this is the perfect picture to put on the front of this advert. You're gonna put your front of house, the thing
Yes.
that sells your house the best. Think about your resume the same way.
Hmm.
Put the things that sell you best at the top of your resume.
Very top.
Um,
Yeah.
and I think another thing I'd say on that is in South Africa, in America, there's less of this problem, but it's very common here. In South Africa, people have 12, 13, 14, 16 page resumes. And
Hmm.
being so used to
I
the
have a
US market,
27-page resume.
yeah, and there's a place for it, but when you're applying, go with a two-pager.
Yeah,
Um,
and that's where you have to tailor it a little bit to the position because it shows that you took some effort, right?
yes,
What you just said about the first half a page, I have a book, not to promote my book too much on there, but I did a resume remix because for I've now been 34 years working in industry and I've helped so many people transition in different careers into cyber and IT. And one of the things I do is I do a lot of work with resumes, and I tell people the same thing. If a recruiter's got to look at a couple hundred resumes a day, they only have so much time. They're not going to get the page. They might get the page two if they're so interested, but if they're not interested from the top half of the page, they're going to the
yeah,
next resume. And if you got 3 pages, they're probably never going to see the third page. So, for like defense work, like military and government, I'll say put your clearance up there because they have to check certain
yes,
boxes. Do you have the appropriate clearance? Do you have, if they requires a degree, like certain positions, certain areas, like Germany, for example, because of TESA and other regulations, they may need a degree makes it easier to fast track you to
yeah,
live there. So there's certain conditions that you want, and you want all that information. Like you just said, the education, the certifications, because if they're looking for a particular cert, they might be 3 checkboxes that they cannot even call or contact you unless they check those
yeah,
3 checkboxes. So it might be, oh, he needs a bachelor's, needs at least this certification, and needs this third thing. And it could be minimum years experience, 3, 5, or more years experience, or it could
yeah,
be experience with a tool or platform. So another section I tell people put is your skills, like what tools you've worked with as a pen tester, what platforms, list them. Just have a running list because
yeah,
if that's the third one, hey, you got the degree, you got the cert we need, but we need experience with this particular tool because this is what we use in our
yeah.
company. And that to me is aligns exactly what you're saying. But not to go down too far down the resume route, and that's great advice.
I could talk
What
about I could talk about resumes for hours,
and you know what? I'd
unfortunately.
love to have you back just to do a whole session on just resume reviews where we could just pull up some resumes on the screen and just start going through resumes. But because we want to give people some actionable information, and we've already did, like make sure you're advertising yourself like a house ad, or it's that first half of that page has got to be an advertisement of you with all the best things and the most important
Mhm.
things. But now let's talk about red flags. what is things that you've seen on resumes that you're like, it does not add any value that people, they, like you said, like a bathroom picture leading the house
Yeah.
advertisement. What are the red flags that if someone's watching right now that they need to be aware of, like, hey, this is a red flag. When recruiters see this, we're not taking you seriously, or we wasted our time. We're moving on to the next resume.
Okay. Um, on this subject too, I can speak for hours. I actually made a LinkedIn post the other day because I basically had gone through my database and I only have 2,000 profiles on my database. And I got frustrated because I would come across a resume and then going through the pages and pages, I find the skills I'm looking for. And then I realized the person's the email doesn't work, or you email them, and then later on you find out that the inbox is full, so they're not getting. So I'm telling them, hey, here's this job. If you're interested, please apply, and the inbox is full,
Mm.
or they don't have the location where they're at. So that's a big thing. Now,
Yes.
location is the thing for me. If you're looking for a job in security and you're putting your full home address in there, that in my mind, to be blunt, is a red flag to me. Like, we don't need to know where we need to put a letter through the mailbox. We just need to know roughly where you are.
Yeah.
If you're in
Houston,
Austin,
Texas, for
Texas,
example, New
yeah,
York, Washington, D.C.,
um,
city and
that.
state, or
But
yeah.
at least just put the location in there. And I found a resume the other day, and this person's perfect for a job I have here in Cape Town, but I have no idea where in the country they are. And now, do I need to take 10 minutes and do open source intelligence to try to find this person? I don't know. I'm quite busy. So that's a big thing. I think another thing that people get wrong, and it's similar to this, is overloading on personal information.
Mm.
Like in South Africa, it's really bad. In South Africa, and it comes from what we learn in school. In school, they teach us how to do CVs because we have such high unemployment here. And people put in their marital status, how many kids, their health, what driving license they have, their religion, their weight, their like eyesight, their hearing. And I'm like, I just need to know what I can call you, what your email address is, roughly where you are, and and a phone number so I can contact you. That is about it.
Mhm.
Um, Other red flags I find is, and it has to do with a long resume, but I think people think they should take an entire job description and dump it
Yeah.
in their resume. The fact is, you don't need to explain every single little thing you've done. Just give us an appetizer of what you've done, and use contextual language in what you've done, and start with verbs: demonstrated, executed, delivered, authorized, whatever. And don't just say, I did network scanning. What did you do network scanning? What did you do vulnerability scanning with? Did you use Nessus? Did you
Mhm.
use Qualys? Did you use ArcSight? Whatever you used.
Mhm.
Um, that context is where a lot of people get it wrong.
To add to that, I went through several rounds and I've flown out to San Francisco to interview with Google years and years ago. And during the process, it was a very unique process because I had a recruiter that was like working with me to make it the process as successful as possible for me. And so, one of the things that they told me that I had to redo, because with some resumes I do like bullets of like what my duties and responsibilities were, and they were like, Mr. West. We get everybody's responsible for something, but what we're looking for is what did you do with that responsibility? So look at your
Yes.
bullets as, let's say you manage, 20,000 endpoints, etc. But did you employ an algorithm, build a script to make that admin
Yes.
task?
That's that context.
The context, like give us the biggest accomplishment you did with those duties. So while you manage,
Yeah.
20,000 endpoints, you created automated scripts to help patch them to this, which resulted in X number of hours per
Yeah.
annum and hours, whether you're saving time or
Yeah.
money, or identified license issues that were once corrected, saved the company,
Yeah.
500,000 a year. Things like that. They would like, we're looking for more metrics behind the
Yeah.
responsibility duties, which was a
Is
beautiful insight that I now still recommend to people today. So, again, I know you mentioned you could talk forever about these red flags, and you mentioned you did do a post on LinkedIn. So if you'd share that post with me, the URL to it, I'll put it in the
Yeah.
description below. So for
I
folks
ran
that are
out of
like,
space.
yeah, for folks that are like, hey, I want to read that LinkedIn post. Well, guess what? If to just
Yeah.
get it to me,
It, it,
Charles, it'll be down here. Just pause the video, check it out, and then come back and play the rest of this video.
I'll do that. It probably comes across a bit as a rant.
No worries, no worries. So, when we're talking about these positions you're trying to fill, what are some of the common certifications? So let's talk about that. I know that every job can be a little different, and every organization can have a preference. Like offensive security cert versus like a CEH versus a GPIN or PIN Plus from CompTIA. But but for people that are, because obviously everybody, if they're having to pay for their own certification, study materials, and their investment of their time, it's kind of the question I'm looking for is bang for the buck, right? If someone's watching this saying, "Hey, I'm starting right now my journey to become a pen tester or to become a vulnerability researcher or any of these elite roles," what is the cert that I should really like? What is the Mount Everest of certs, like the top cert? But what's the cert that will give me the most exposure to entry level to intermediate opportunities? Let's start there. Let's start at entry level. What is the best, from your perspective and experience, best bang for your buck for these type of roles that you recruit for?
This is always a dangerous, slippery, and fiery question. And just by the way, I'm not affiliated with with any company. So when it comes to entry level, on HackSouth, I've come across a lot of people that have just joined and they were looking at certifications, and then I sort of I catch them right before they pay the money. Bear in mind, a lot of these people have very low paying jobs, and this investment is quite big for
Yes.
them. So, typically these people are looking at the EC Council type stuff. So, you'll see H type route. They're looking at CompTIA A, your A plus, Security plus, Network plus, Linux plus,
Hmm.
and then there's also obviously eLearn Security, which is INE now. I think is
Yeah.
or I call it eLearn, but I know it's INE.
Hmm.
Uh, a lot of times I will then do a call with them. Now, I base this basically on the 10 years I've done this. I haven't done any of these certifications myself, so it's one of those who can't do recruit. Uh, I I'm not so sure where to place EC Council things. I know for a lot of defense roles, certain of them require that. I have some clients that mandate that candidates need CEH because
Hmm.
their clients require it. Usually, it's for our government related work. But then my clients tend to just pay for them to go do the coursework and then write the exam. Um, if I find someone that is very analytical thinking, very admin orientated, all that kind of stuff, I do recommend that they maybe they go the CompTIA route. Um, i- and then maybe once again it might be a silly thing, but I said to them, look, have you used computers all your life? And then they go, yes. And I go, don't worry about A plus, just do Security plus or Network plus. The thing I push is fundamentals, and I know networking more than the average man, but less than anyone that works in this industry. But I always push fundamentals of understanding networking. You think about that meme of the kid that skips 6 steps and goes straight to pen testing.
Yeah.
So I always suggest people get the CCNA coursework and do part one, the non-Cisco part, just to understand how networks work.
Yeah.
Um, if I find someone that's a bit more, I don't know what the word is, edgy, like I'm thinking they want to segue into pen testing, I suggest eLearn Security. So EJPT is a good start.
Hmm.
Um, if they've got a bit more budget and they're looking for something a bit tastier, then I would suggest probably Altered Security or TCM. I actually found with some of my more complex clients that they're taking TCM very seriously, so
Hmm.
PJPT, that kind of stuff, and PNPT. Um, and then, you know, despite what you want to say and what people think, and the rollout of OCP Plus, like I looked at OCP Plus and I was like, oh, this sounds a bit problematic. And then I read up about it and I understood, and I was like, I've recruited in defense for 8 years. I understand what's going on here. Um, I remember in when I started recruiting in defense, they had things called an IAT level or IAT
Yeah.
level,
Hmm.
and
DOD
CASB is
eighty-five
IAT
seventy. Yeah.
3. So I understand it's just it's not a box tick, but it's one of those things. Offensive security certs are so widely recognized, and it's a very dangerous thing to say something is a silver bullet in cyber, but something like OSCP is such a is such an acid test and such a mark of someone's ability to do a certain thing in offensive security. Now I've spoken to people with OSCP, and then I'm like, I don't know if this person truly knows what they're doing. And I've spoken to people without OSCP that are extremely good pen testers. But offensive security, despite what anyone says, it's still the sort of prestige on answer as far as offensive security goes. What I will say is, I've had a lot of friends do the Altered Security certifications. They actually sponsor us vouchers every year, as well as offensive security, and the content they put out is really good. Nikhil, he does some really good work with his team. Um, and then there's a lot of other things. So you get your Coursera's and your other place where people learn stuff for cheap. I can't remember the name of the website now, but all those things are good to have. Um, that for me in offense security is a big thing, and you probably realize like I didn't mention something like SANS at all because so SANS is more common in the United States, especially in defense,
Hmm.
because Uncle Sam pays for that. In South
It's
Africa,
very expensive. So, folks, if
in
you not know
yeah,
anything about SANS, SANS is the educational training organization. Then they have
yeah,
a subsidiary company called GIAC, GIAC, that is
yeah,
their certification organization. And the issue is that it's an open book test. And when people hear the term open book, they assume, oh, it must be easy. No, it's a time. So it's usually about 100, 150 questions. And if you do the math on the time they give you, you roughly have about 2 to 4 minutes, depending on the test. But here's the thing. You got to get the books, right? You have to have the right books for the right test. The only way to easily get the books if you can't find them on eBay or on the internet somewhere, and then even then you may have an old, outdated version because they update these books every 2 to 3 years. So even if you get a current version, now you have to actually index the book. So this is what the people make a mistake. Let's say they find on eBay because the only other official way to get the books is to take a course, and they include them, or you have to pay a lot of money for them. There's thousands of dollars. So, and then the
8,000,
exam,
9,000. It's a
yes, and
lot.
the exam vouchers are also $1,000. So even if you got the books on eBay, let's say you found something on eBay for like 500, 600 bucks, you get it, and then you have to build an index. An index is basically a table of contents because these books do not have a table of contents. So now you're having to almost index every single term and terminology. So now here's the quandary. You're thinking it's easy because it's open book. You sit for the test, and now you're page flipping, looking for the answer. You got that 2 to 4 minutes that goes by super fast. Lots of people end up running out of time on these tests after they committed all this money, a lot of money. And so I also would not immediately recommend a GIAC exam for anyone that is starting out. If you get into a company and they give you the opportunity to take a training
Yeah.
course, by all means, take every education benefit you can with a business once you're hired. If they will send you to give you a SANS course, if they will give you a voucher, take every opportunity once you're in, right? But when you're trying to break in, you want to make this as efficient and as light on the pocketbook as possible because not everybody's rolling on with thousands of dollars. But when you mention CompTIA, I love that recommendation because CompTIA exams are usually about 150 or 200 to about
Mm.
$400 on average. Then you get into like EC Council. I think the highest expensive one is about 600. I think CEH and there's Hacking Forensic CHFI, their second most popular cert, is around $600. So they're under 1,000. And like I said, the training is usually bundled with training. But I love the CompTIAs because they are good entry level. They're
Yeah.
easy on the pocketbook, and there's just a couple from ISC Square that's not too bad. They run about $500-600 on average at ISC Square. So I love those recommendations. One of the questions I want to get into now, we talked about the resume a little bit. Now let's talk about the interview because obviously once you find these candidates, what are some tips that you give some candidates that to try to help them out before they get exposed to a customer, a hiring manager? What are these pitfalls that people can experience, and what are some tips you give people when they're in the interview?
So interviewing, I think, is a skill. It's something I get reminded of very often, especially when I've had a candidate not work out, and I've had a certain experience with them, and when they get to my client, it didn't work out that way. Um, we could probably avoid the usual things like make sure you're neatly dressed. Now, for me personally, if you've got a I'm wearing a t-shirt now. If you're wearing a decent t-shirt and you're semi well kept, and your background looks fine, like I'm happy.
Hmm.
I've had people that will join a call and it looks like they put their finger in a plug socket, which isn't very possible by you folks, but in us, we've got big holes where you put your finger in. And they've got an unmade bed in there. And I don't mind if you're doing the call in your bedroom, like we all work,
Or
many of us
use the
work from
blur
home. But
function. Like I just
but
moved in this
yeah,
apartment. I have boxes
yeah.
behind
I've
me.
got like you saw earlier, I've got a ladder, a unput up whiteboard, and a half a
I
bed
just
base
move it
here
to the
on my right.
side. Yeah, yeah.
So just making sure your surroundings are good. Another thing, and it's become a bit of an ick for me, is an unstabilized camera platform. Now, during this conversation, my iPhone 12 decided to overheat because it's 40 degrees Celsius here today. But I don't mind people doing a call on their phone. It happens a lot in defense because people work in a skiff, so they go sit in their car and they do a
Yep.
call. But just try to stabilize it in some way. Uh, I've got about six different like phone holders that I just have on my desk. I could just drop my phone in. I even built one here for YouTube that I built out of Lego, just to make my
Nice.
life a bit easier. So just having a stabilized platform, think about what you dress, your background, and then uh, we struggle with neurodiversity. We don't struggle. We thrive with neurodiversity in this industry, but what it means is we sometimes struggle with certain things. So social cues is a big thing. When I do my calls with candidates, I typically don't talk to them for longer than 30 minutes. Yes, we'll do a couple of calls throughout the process as I send them to a client and things get further and I need to brief them, prepare them for, second and third rounds and finals. Is is picking up on the social cue.
Second. All right. So you were talking about social cues. What are some of the social cues that people should be mindful of, whether it's their social cues they're not paying attention to or the interviewers?
Yeah, so social cues that they need to pick up on the interviewer side is if you are answering and you have to be mindful of how long you've been talking, and often it'll feel like you've been talking a lot longer than what you have. But you need to talk with a nice, calm cadence, not rush yourself and not be out of breath, but also pick up when the person interviewing you starts going, okay, okay, yeah, yeah. When they start becoming a more active listener, that's your social cue to know I need to slow down, I need to end the topic and finish off there. Now, if you still had lots more to say and you wanted to present all your information related to their question, there's nothing you like closing off your, let's call it, argument and saying, does that answer your question? And there's nothing stopping you when you start answering a question that you're not quite sure of. Once again, you can ask for clarity and ask him to repeat the question. But if you're starting to answer the question, there's nothing stopping you to go to them and say, "Are we going the right direction? Is this what you were asking?" I've had candidates where I asked them the same question 4 times, and then they wing it. And it's a simple question of what inspired you to get into cybersecurity? Like what was the point of inception of getting in this industry? And then
So
they
I'm
say,
not
currently
homeless.
I'm doing this. And I'm like, yeah, like if you tell me pay the bills, I'm like,
Pay the
sure.
bills.
Um, there's these things, and then I think when it comes to, you're doing this call with me, a recruiter. A thing that happens, it doesn't happen that often, but it does happen sometimes, is when you're working with a recruiter, I typically will discuss numbers.
Mhm.
And it's only if you're comfortable, depends on state regulations in certain places. I know California and I think New York is a bit funny on expectations and current. Um, but if you decide to talk numbers to your recruiter, make sure, if you do that, make sure you know the number they're sending you at. Now, what you don't want to do is get on your first interview, and if that question does come up, so Jim, what sort of compensation are you looking for as a base salary?
Mhm.
And you discuss it with your recruiter, and with your recruiter, you said, you know what, Charlie, I'm looking for 150 base. Ideally, I'd like a 160. And I said to you, you know what, Jim, let me meet in the middle. I'm going to sub you at 155. We'll negotiate it down. If you on that call then go, you know what, I'm actually looking for 175. There's so many negatives that came out of that interaction now that just it just and that's not to say you can't be submitted at 155, and by the end of that whole interview process, 3 interviews down, you're sitting on 185. But that's where me, bearing in mind, you're looking for a job every, I don't know, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. I'm looking for jobs, multiple jobs every day for the last 10 years. So I know how to go to my client and say, hey, listen, I had a chat with Jim. They really enjoyed the conversation, X, Y, Z. Based on that, we believe that the you're looking for and what the job actually is a bit more elevated, a bit more
Hmm.
senior. Therefore, we think due to those responsibilities, we need to bump the number by 5 or bump the number by 10.
Hmm.
Most of my clients will go, you know what, Charlie, you actually make a good point. Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah.
But if
I,
you just drop a big number on the interview,
Yeah, it can
it
kill
sets off a
every
lot of
any
things.
negotiation from happening. I usually
Yeah,
tell people to do their research first. Like, where's the job located? What are some of the, you can use Glassdoor, salary.com. Like, there's some sites you could do some quick searches for the role and
yeah,
titles and get an idea of a range, right? There's going to
yeah,
be, a low area range, a median, and there's going to be a high end. But just at least know the range and then this is the hard part because we all want to think we're perfect and we're awesome and irreplaceable, but in the job market we're very replaceable, right? And there's levels
yeah,
of experience and levels of certifications that companies are willing to go down to if it means saving money, because usually
yeah,
IT cyber budgets are the first ones to get reduced, cut
yeah,
even. So what I tell people is have a range in mind, and in that range obviously everybody wants to make the most they can. So let's just use easy math,
yeah,
right? Let's say 200K is what the dream. I want 200K, but the market says that it caps out at about 175, right? So the reality is the market says 175. Even though I want 200, that's just my dream. Reality in the market says 175 for that particular city, for that particular role. Then I got to start looking, well, what's the median? Because just because that's the high doesn't mean I'm guaranteed that. Not
yeah,
every company has that budget for that. So what's the median? So let's say I find the median's like 150, right? So there's a 25K room on this side of that median, and then let's say it goes all the way down to, let's say, 125. So I got 25K on both sides of that median range. Now, what I have to ask myself, and this is where the honest truth is, what is the salary that I would be content with? I like to use the word content because when you say what I accept means like you're self-defeating. I like the word
yeah,
content.
yeah,
You know, I could be content. You know what? I want to make 175, but I understand that for budget reason, whatever the reason is, X is the reason. You know what? I'm in a position where I either need a job, I need to keep income going, or I'm not happy where I'm at. Because why are you looking for a job in the first place? You didn't have contentment. If you was content, why are you looking for a new job? So a
yeah,
lot of times we're in an uncomfortable position where we don't like our boss. We're doing all the work. We're burning out, or we want to change a career or change of scenery, or it could be just better hours, better other benefits. There's so many intangibles that I tell people. But get that range and identify what content is for you, not what the max. Find the content range, and if it's as close between median and the high, you're doing well. But give a range. Then the statement I like to use, because no one wants to talk numbers, or they don't want to shoot themselves in the foot either, right? So there's two things I usually say, and this is the first canned statement I make, but it doesn't always work. As I say, well, given my experience, credentials, and qualifications, I know you'll make me a fair and reasonable offer. That's what I usually say first. But a lot of times a hiring manager or recruiter says, look, we got to have a number, right? And that's usually
yeah.
brass
It's
tacks,
also
right?
to ensure they're not wasting your time or their
Thank
own.
you. So then I'll follow up with, well, my range is, and then I provide a range. And I'll add in, this is the important part, uh, negotiable upon benefits. So the first benefit that I personally look for is there any negotiation room for extra PTO, paid time off, vacation days? Because if that's possible, for example, let's say I've worked with a company for, let's say, 10 years, and in that 10 years, I've reached a certain level of vacation days or weeks a year. When you start with another company, usually HR policies, they start you at you're a year zero employee building up to that level. So one of the things I can negotiate is, hey, I've got 34 years. I've been with certain companies for a decade plus where I've built up to this level of, let's say I want 5 weeks a year, but the standard company is 2 weeks. I'm like, that's something we need to negotiate. I'm willing to, negotiate here and there. So the key thing is be flexible, is what I tell a lot of people, because the moment you have hard set numbers and hard set figures, you're going to be having the door shut really quickly on you. And here's the
Mm,
other thing that can happen. Let's say you're interviewing, with a big company. Let's say like GDIT is one of the top defense contractors in the world. And let's say that recruiter is one of their top recruiters that's got, positions they fill in a whole region, and that's the region you want to live in. The worst thing that could happen is if you ruin that first opportunity because you got set on a number, you got really hard-headed or just, indignant,
Arrogant.
didn't want to budge or be flexible, they're going to remember that. Next time they see your resume
Mm,
for a future opportunity, they're going to be like, nope, I'm not dealing with Jim West anymore. I'm going to move on to the next guy. He was difficult to
yeah.
talk to. So remember, be, flexible is a good word. Be willing to negotiate. But before you even engage into the process, make sure you do a little research because one, you want to know what the average salaries are, have that number already. You don't want to just pick a number out of the air. And two, while you're researching the job, make sure that you are a good fit. Just because the title is something you want, is might have been something you've done before. Every job is a fingerprint, it's unique, right? Really read through it and then pull up the company profile. What are they working on that's in public record that you can, they say do your research, right? So that when you're in an
Mm,
interview, you could say, hey, I noticed that you guys just announced this award. You just won this work with this. How would my role impact that? And that shows where you've done work, you showed interest, and now that does it changes the dynamic of the interview because now the hiring manager's like, oh, this guy's done his homework. He just saw this. Oh yeah, your role impacts it and it leads to a
yeah.
completely different interview, a completely different experience in that process. So I
And
didn't mean to go off on too long of a tangent
no,
there,
no, it's
Charles.
fine. If I
But
can just add a last thing, like the overarching thing when it comes talking about money is if you if you if you're in a job paying 160 and you want to go for 200, unless you've been with your existing company for very long, because if you start hitting a 3-year mark at a company, your compensation will slope off. It will stagnate as opposed to if you move company. But if you're gunning for $200,000, you need to interview and deliver as someone that's worth $200,000. Bearing in mind, a lot of people think, oh, a company wants to hire me at 200, I have to give them 200,000 value. No, I think I don't know what the metric is these days, but you got to provide about 5 times the value that you cost the company.
and
And it's
sometimes
not just your
more.
basic, it's everything else included. So if you can demonstrate to that company the value that you're going to bring to them, they will be willing to pay the price. They're willing to take the chance. Bearing in mind, in South Africa, it's very hard to lay someone off. Like we don't have layoffs here. We call it retrenchments, and that's a very regulated thing. In America, it's very different. Like people lose their jobs
Massive.
pretty quickly. Yeah,
Yeah.
it takes 3 months to fire someone in South Africa. So if you can interview well and you can smash your interview, that's perfect. And the last thing I'll say is if you're moving into the upper echelons of your industry, you're becoming a manager, a senior manager, and I'm not talking about becoming a vice president in a company, but they just give you that title because you sound important when you speak to clients. Like if you're becoming a senior person, if you haven't got the confidence to talk to me about numbers, it's not a red flag to me, but it's a concern to me because I've spoken to enough people at that high level that if they haven't got the confidence to go, right, Charlie, what I'm what I really want is 250. What I think I'm worth is probably 220, and my absolute is 210. I can work with that because
Yep.
remember, recruiters get paid usually by a percentage measure of your first year basic salary. So if I can get you more, I'm gonna get make more as well. Uh,
Mhm.
so so you if you could just you need to just deliver an interview at the number you're looking for.
Mhm.
A good interview gets you a very long way with a company.
Yes. Another thing you mentioned at the beginning of the call, and when you mentioned the four things you want to see on a resume, and this is something that's really near and dear to my heart, is you mentioned that kind of like that industry involvement or social interaction and so forth. I forget the term you used, but to
Community
me,
engagement. I
community, thank
change
you.
it every
Community
month.
engagement.
Yeah.
So for me, I speak at about 8 to 10 conferences a year. So that's one of the big facets of my CV is that I'm a public speaker and I speak on a lot of emerging technology topics. But there's other ways of engagement. For example, attending conferences, things like
Yeah.
B-Sides Cape Town, which we'll talk about in a second, or like Hack South, you're a founder for that. If there's any online communities and groups that you're affiliated with, this, or if you just do a blog post or a YouTube channel or something talking about tech or
Yeah.
security, what that does is it gives kind of like the word I'll use is like social proof to that kind of not I don't want to use the word establishes, but it lends some credence to that what you have in your resume. Meaning, this guy's also helping others learn as he's interacting with other professionals. So it's one of the what I call an X factor. Because think about it, in 100 to 1,000 resumes in a week reviewed, how many people is going to be able to list those kind of things? You know, that they're part of the B sides, they're part of this
Mm,
group, part of that group, they're on this GitHub, they're on, all of these different things and groups and areas of community of interest that so many people won't have because people are just thinking, I
yeah,
got my degree here, I got my cert, and all this, that paragraph of how great I am that everybody, to me that's wasted
yeah,
space. I'd rather fill it with a list of skills, but that's just me. But the key thing is that I think that last of the four things you said in the top half of the page is that community engagement that you said, and I love it, is I
yeah,
think that's truly your X factor. If you really want to stand out, and that's something you could do, folks, right now. Just Google anything in your area. There's going to be clubs, groups, even online that you can get involved with. There's things that you can get your hands dirty with before you even start the process of the interviews that you can start adding to your resume. But that's something you need to start now, right? It's like, for
yeah,
example, it's a good analogy I like to use. It's never too early to always educate yourself, right? So educate,
yeah,
do all of that up front so that it can be reflected in the resume in the CV. But I love that community engagement. Could you expand upon it a little bit and maybe talk a little bit
yeah,
about
yeah,
what you do with B-Sides Cape Town and Hack South?
yeah. No, definitely. Yeah, like you were saying now, the other way to say it is the best time to have done this was yesterday. The next best
Yesterday,
time is
that's what I was
now.
thinking of. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so me as a recruiter, when I do a search on LinkedIn, right, I will search security engineer in Austin, Texas, and I might get 4,000 results. Now, back when I was more of just getting into recruiting, I could go through about 6,500 LinkedIn profiles in a month, just cycling through them. I created hotkeys on my keyboard so I could get to them quicker.
Yeah.
Um, and if I needed to filter that down to about 300 I can do in a 1 hour sprint. I had like a Boolean string of keywords and I would search B-sides or DEF CON or Black Hat or da 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 da. So that just helped me bring it up on a search. Now, when I would do my call with someone, it was always a subject that came up. And when you've been involved in the community such as I have, and I've worked very hard to get as involved as I can and give back as much as I can, you start understanding what a certain, let's call it accolade, means in the industry. Now, yes, we all know to get selected as a DEF CON speaker is is very hard, or a Black Hat speaker, even a DEF CON village speaker, um, and then a BSAR speaker. Now, there are all these things, and then you work all the way down to being just an attendee at B-sides. Now, the first thing I tell people when like I told you earlier about certifications and how I give some people direction, if they're local to Cape Town, I said, okay, if I get a grasp of their financial situation, I'll speak to my team or be at B-sides Cape Town, and I'll go, guys, give me a com code, please, and I issue it to the guy or the girl or whoever, and
Man.
I say, hey, come down here, and if you need an Uber voucher, let us know. We'll send you an Uber voucher. Um, we open up for volunteers this year. We got 65 signups and 30 people were selected. We have a much wider, larger venue, so we need more volunteers. And they also get a com ticket. They get the usual stuff, their t-shirt and their badge and lanyards. This year they're getting mouse pads as well. And then, in South Africa, like transport is a challenge for certain people. So irrespective of whether you drive a BMW or you live in a local township, we issue every volunteer a 500 Rand Uber voucher, which is like, I don't know, like $40, but $40 gets you
Mhm.
quite far here in South Africa. So I always tell people find your community. Now, if you live in the sticks, you got to pursue the local, the online communities, and there
Mhm.
there is quite a few. Now, I'm part of about, I don't know, 40 different Discord communities, of which I spend 95% of my time on probably one of them being Hack South, the other one is a gaming one. But there's a lot of really good, useful communities. I know Try Hack Me has a really good community.
Yep.
I know Hack the Box has a really good community. We actually didn't talk about them in the certifications earlier, but they're
Mhm.
also really good, a place to go to get good value and good
Good
skills.
hands-on.
Yeah, so the community is getting involved in the community in whatever capacity, as a attendee, as a volunteer, as an organizer, as a speaker, as a workshop, as a whatever. Let's say you now have a goal in your mind of, I want to do I want five different things on my resume. That's four, but I don't want my, let's say you want to put four things in your resume, what you do in the community. You're gonna do the first thing, then you got the one, then you're gonna do the next, then you do the next. Now you got four. Now you do a fifth thing, and then you look at these four and you go, which one is the least valuable? So I was a B-sides attendee, and then I did this thing here, this thing here, this thing here. Now I become a B-sides volunteer. Maybe I remove attendee and I add a volunteer.
Right.
With people with Hack South, I even tell people when I interview them, and I always ask them, have you ever heard of Hack South, or you're part of Hack South? If they say yes, and I say, hey, put it on your CV. Just say you're a Hack South member, because, and I, no word of a lie, I have placed people with clients of mine in South Africa where the interview didn't go that well and the resume wasn't that perfect, and the experience wasn't perfect. But when they found out what the person's handle was on Hack South, which I obviously only passed on with the permission of the user, they went, "Oh, I know such and such. Yeah, I see them. They're always active, always helping. They're always friendly. Yeah, no, definitely.
Wow.
We want to take a chance on them." So so find your local community. In America, you're pretty blessed with so many different communities. I think there's a B-sides in almost every city.
Every
In the
city.
UK, there's a B-sides in pretty much every city. In South Africa, we've got two now, which is B-sides Cape Town, and then last year we started B-sides Joburg with Jared Nordia, that's been on the B-sides Cape Town team for a few years. But
Excellent.
yeah, find your community, get involved.
I love that. Okay, so we could definitely talk on and on about these things, but thank you for some of the insights and perspectives you've given, Charles. So I want to go. This is my favorite question for all my guests, and so you kind of surmise your career a little bit, so it might be. But the goal of this question is: if we go back in time when you said, "Hey, I want to do recruiting and I want to get involved with IT and cyber and in this world that you're involved with now," what's your day one story? What was the story behind it that you could share with us?
Uh, I'll tell the story, but first I'll tell you a regret. When I was
Okay.
in high school, a friend of mine came to me, Brian Isaacs. He's now a developer at a company in South Africa. And when I needed games, like obviously I got pirated crack games as a kid, because my dad wasn't going to pay for me to play
Yeah.
Delta Force. He still came to me one day with a copy of Linux, and he said to me, I went behind my middle name. He's like, "Hein, do you want a copy of Linux?" And I was like, "What's this?" And he's like, "It's a new operating system everyone's using." And I was like, I think I had Windows 95 then. I was like, "I got Windows 95. I
Yeah.
don't need another operating system." But that was such a lost opportunity for me. Fast forward, I don't know, gosh, 20 years. So I'd gone to the military for 6 years. I'd done contracting for 6 years. And I was tired of contracting. I wasn't enjoying the travel, and I, I got the same feeling in contracting I got in the military where uh, I started feeling stupid. Like I wasn't utilizing this brain I was given.
Hmm.
And through a community I ran, for the service leavers getting into private military contracting, a friend of mine, a woman that I'd met on there, she goes by Swordfish now. She's also in cyber, um, in the UK. She messaged me on Facebook one day and she said, "Hey, how's your consultancy going?" Because I started my own security consultancy, doing like physical security,
Hmm.
man guarding, that kind of thing. And she said, "Hey, she has a friend coming to Cape Town. He's coming for a few weeks. Could I maybe just chat to him? He's a bit young. Can I just chat to him and just tell him where to go, where not to go, what to avoid?" It's Africa, but it's Cape Town. So Cape Town's very safe, but it depends where you are.
Yeah.
And if you're local, you don't even have to know where you are. You just you feel the atmospherics. So anyway, I spoke to this gentleman. His name was Marcelo, and uh, I gave him the brief, like emergency contact numbers, and if he needs anything. And then he asked me what I do, and I said, no, I run a security consultancy. And he's like, oh, that's interesting. And I asked him what he does, and he says, no, he recruits hackers for a living. And immediately I thought, I should tell my friend Swordfish that this guy is a major red flag because hackers are horrible, horrible people destroying, grandmothers' lives and just causing chaos, And I said to him, I don't know, because we were planning to meet up, and I said, I don't know if I want to meet up with you. He goes, why? It's like, because you recruit hackers. Like, hackers are horrible people. And he goes, dude, just shut up and meet me at the waterfront. We'll drink 2 beers. If you still feel the same, then sure. So anyway, I met up with him. And honestly, one of the first things he told me about, before anything about the industry, he told me about the community. And he said, find out if there's a B-sides in Cape Town, and there was. So I went to the first one the first one was 13 years ago. I went in 2016, 2015, and he told me about the community. That's the first thing he did, and I really found it interesting. Then I learned more about the industry, and I realized like it's a proper commercial industry, and there's people making money in it. And it took me a few weeks of learning about this to realize, like, gosh, when I met that educational officer in the army, or my friend Brian Isaacs in school, I wish I took that copy of Linux. I wish someone had said, "Oh, you don't want to be a bricklayer or a carpenter. Why don't you, have you heard about this new thing, cybersecurity?" Maybe my path would have gone different and I wouldn't have been a recruiter. So, yeah, I worked with Marcelo for a while, for a few years, and I basically got into recruiting and cyber at the same time. I'd, I'd always, I'd always liked the idea of recruiting, and I'd done recruiting before that, but I didn't know what recruiters got paid. I used to, because I had so many good contacts with the community I ran when I left the military. I helped a lot of my friends in my unit get jobs at maritime security companies.
Yeah.
uh, and then my fee was, dude, if I get you this job, pay me 1 day of your wage, which is like $300. Now I look at that, I'm like, I wouldn't get out of bed for a
Yeah.
$300 recruiting fee.
Hmm.
But yeah, and then I got involved, and B-sides pretty much led to everything else, and
Community
then led us to Act
engagement.
South. Yeah.
Community engagement got you, and I love that story. Thank you for sharing it with us. So the next thing and I think you already mentioned the one gentleman that got you into this recruiting, but the question goes is that I'm looking for people that you admired in industry, people you looked up to. It could be a coworker, colleague, a manager, or boss. But along your journey to this point, have there been people that had a really positive impact on you so far? And I know you just mentioned the one gentleman that introduced you to this. But
Yeah.
is there any other folks you want to kind of shine a light on their names and say, pay homage to that? Hey, this person, you mentioned Swordfish, but has there been other people that had a positive impact on you in the past, decade?
Yeah, I've been very blessed to meet a lot of interesting people through the years. Jason E. Street, Chris Kubeka, uh, a lot of the sort of well-known people here in South Africa, Roloff Temming, Charles van der Walt, but there's certain people that have always backed me up and stood in my corner. One of them here in South Africa is one of my longest standing clients in South Africa, Dominic White. He's managing director of Orange Cyber Defense, who used to be called Sense Post. They do training at Black Hat every year. Um, he has become such a big supporter of my work, and has done it publicly. And when I've been working till 2, 3 in the morning, questioning why I'm in this industry and if I even have a place in it, um, he's always been there, just like a phone call away. So Dominic White is a big one for me. Um, I've come across so many people, and sometimes it's hard to single out. The team I have with B-Sides Cape Town, they're very supportive, even when I'm going through my own journey and my own battles. They've always been there for me. Um, Someone who inspires me from a business perspective in cybersecurity is, of course, Harun Mia from Things Applied Research, that do the Canary honeypots. Uh, what a phenomenal story. I'm very lucky to actually work with Things, both on their sales and recruiting side. And uh, you know the way you see Harun Mia, like when you meet him at a conference and you talk to him, yeah, even though he is at the pinnacle of achievement in security, he's still down to earth, still humble, always just a text or a phone call away. And he has built a formidable company focusing on just two things: great product, great customer success, the same price since They've been selling their canaries at the same price they did since they started. No frills, no cheese, and when you watch a talk by him at a conference, whether it's B-Sides Cape Town or DevConf, which is a local developer conference, very similar name to DevCon,
Oh, okay.
uh, it inspires you. He did a talk last year about how we as South Africans need to build more things, and he inspires me and he inspires so many other people. But yeah, those are just to name a few. And of
Well,
course my
thank you.
wife. My
Oh,
wife, the ever
can't,
ever loving, ever supportive, her and
can't
my
forget that
daughter.
one. That's the biggest
Yeah,
impact on a life, right?
definitely,
Um,
definitely.
this is part of the podcast where I like to do some rapid fire questions just for levity, kind of a break from all the tech talk and
Yeah.
talking careers and real world stuff. Just have some fun. So if you just humor me, I'm gonna shoot you some questions. Whatever the first thing pops in your head, just blurt it out. There's no right or wrong answer, okay? So I'm
Okay.
gonna hit you with this one. Is a hot dog a sandwich? So for people from South
No.
Africa, is a hot dog a sandwich?
No.
This is not a sandwich. Okay. All right. Now this is going to split the tech room. So techies are divided on this one. Star Wars or Star Trek?
Star Wars.
Star Wars. Which part or trilogy of the Star Wars are you the biggest fan of?
It's more that I'm not a fan of Star Trek.
Okay, it's in spite of Star Trekkies. Okay, I can
Yeah.
appreciate that one. Um, cake or pie?
Cake.
What kind of cake?
Carrot cake. I like a good carrot cake.
Hot or cold carrot cake?
Cold carrot cake.
Cold carrot cake. Okay. What was the last book you've read, and what was your most favorite book of all time that you've read?
The last book I finished was Atomic Habits,
Good book.
by a very well-known author. I can't remember his name now.
You'll get the link for me and we'll have it in the description below.
Yeah.
And what's your favorite
And
book of all time?
favorite book is a tie for me between Sun Tzu's Art of Modern Warfare. I've probably read that about 10 times. I
Mhm.
read that through I think you Americans call it senior year, my matric exams.
Uh-huh.
I read that thing 3 times through my matric year instead of studying. And it was my favorite fictional book of that was called Pandemic, and it's a whole CIA MI5 conspiracy. Like, I'm not a conspiracy person, but it
Uh-huh.
was one of my favorite books, called Pandemic. I randomly
Mhm.
stumbled across it on a ship in Mozambique,
So it was
and I
just by
probably read it.
happenstance you found this book and it just was
And it
that
was it
riveting.
was this thick, and I probably
Wow.
read it in like 2 days. And I'm not I struggle to read that much.
Wow. So that's how great of a book it was. If you could give me
Yeah,
all those URLs to like Amazon's links to those books, I'll put them in the
definitely,
description below to
definitely.
save you, the viewer, the Google search, because we'll have it in the description below. Um, we could keep talking for hours and hours, but I do want to respect your time. Let's talk about what's next. What's on the pathway of, we're at the end of 2025, and so we're about to go into 2026. What's in store for you in 2026? What are the big plans? What are the new events, conferences, activities? What do you got? What is your big plans for 2026?
So, every year I start a new year, and I go, the last year was rough, but next year it's my year.
Hmm.
I really feel confident about that. I've been working on a project over the last year with a good friend of mine that I also met on Hack South. It's something called HerdNet. Part of the reason why it hasn't launched is, imposter syndrome and a few things that I'm struggling with there, along with the pace of organizing that it takes to put B-Sides Cape Town together. But next year I'll probably be taking a bit of a step back. So HerdNet is something I'm working on. Hoping to launch, I think at the moment, probably launch in December or early in January. And very long story short, it's over the last 2 years, with recruiting not being quite where I wanted it to be, with the industry and whatnot, I got involved in sales, so helping companies find security services, whether it's pen testing or VAPT or whatnot. And I looked at how they acquire things and how they talk about budgets and what they actually do in the end, and I thought it was a bit flawed. So basically, what HerdNet will be is it's kind of like a marketplace where in the space it takes to attend an emergency board meeting, you can Uh, you can allocate the security services you require, and you can get an estimate in the region that you require, and engage with contractors that have the right budget or the right costing that fits your budget, and have the right trust index for what you require. There's obviously a lot to figure out there, and I need to just rip the band-aid off, I think, and just drop it or launch it. Besides Cape Town, I might take a bit of a step back because I've got a baby boy on the way in February,
Congratulations.
with my wife. Thank you very much. That's why I moved office. I'm no longer in my office for the aircon. Uh, and then, you know, I've been with B-Sides Cape Town now for I think 6, 7 years. I think once our baby boy settled in, maybe not 2026, maybe 2027, I've always explored the idea of starting my own conference. In South Africa, we now have B-Sides Cape Town, B-Sides Joburg, which is very great community conferences. There is one or two very big commercial conferences like our Black Hat,
Mhm.
but I feel the disparity in the user experience of the two is so vast, and I'd love to just even that kill. So I am thinking and considering about starting my own conference.
Wow.
Something where I'll be honest, and I've never shied away from it, or try to keep it under wraps. You know, there is intrinsic business value to me being involved with Hack South and B-Sides, but I always make sure I try to keep the things as veiled and or siloed as much as I can. But a conference where I could put in the same effort I do with B-Sides Cape Town, but maybe in December, I could put a few extra presents under the tree for the kids. That's something I'd like to do. And yeah, I started doing YouTube about
Nice.
4 months ago. I've been very bad with that of recent time, and once again, that is a case of like we struggle today with my phone. I've got an old iPhone 12, and it's that whole I guess it's an ADHD thing sometimes, like having to set up my phone and the microphone not being quite right and having
It's
audio
being a
problems.
perfectionist, right? We want
And then,
everything as
yeah, and
perfect
then
as
you
possible.
watch, and there's nothing worse. In the beginning, I didn't mind editing, and now I've done like 4 or 5 videos, and I can't stand my own voice. So what I'll probably do is I'll subcontract my editing at some point, but I want to stream more and do something like this that's more live. And then the
I tell you
easiest way I can
honestly,
help people is to
uh,
ask me questions, because I've got the information here. I struggle to get it out, but
get
people
it
can
out.
extract it from me.
I don't have a fancy webcam. I don't have like the professional microphones. I just blurred my background because I got boxes all
Yeah,
behind me. And so it's not the super, to me, it's always about the content, right? And
yeah,
being here, you are the content. You've given us these perspectives, these insights, and all the other guests that I have offering their perspectives, insights, and their expertise for a brief moment of time. And just having that's the true goal. So having yourself, whether you're live streaming or video recording, that's the gift you're giving to YouTube. It's not the
yeah,
microphone and the camera, because as you can see here, this is not the professional quality at all. Really, the professional is you, and having you here and
yeah,
having you give your time, that's a blessing to everyone, anyone watching. And even if they got to this point, where I think we just crossed over an hour, thank you for watching to this point, right? And to me, that means people are getting value out of it, and you shared so
yeah,
much insight. And I know we're going to definitely have to talk about maybe next year, a couple seasons. We'll have you come back and we'll do like a resume
definitely.
showdown where we'll just tear through
Yeah,
resumes.
yeah.
Um, a couple more questions I wanted to ask, and so the any URLs, your socials, your businesses, please give me all those URLs. Just give me a whole URL dump, and I'm just going to copy paste it in the
Yeah, I
description.
will
So
definitely
yeah,
do that.
and then people can also follow you on LinkedIn. If people are looking for jobs, where do you want them to go and follow or to connect with you for that? Because I don't want them
Um,
just hitting one social or another. What is your preferred contact method? If someone says, "Hey, I got a resume, I'd like you to have it," like, what do you have?
yeah. Now I've now figured that out. So in the last 10 years in recruiting, I have used about 7 different applicant tracking systems and CRMs, and they're all pretty much terrible. But I've started recently using one I really like since February, and I'm sticking with this one. So people are uh I used to love getting people just reach out to me going, "Hey, I'm looking for a job." I love it, especially when friends reach out to me. The challenge is I have an abundance of that, but I don't have an abundance of roles. And bear in mind, I personally only have a finite amount of roles.
Hmm.
So the best thing you do is you can connect with me, you can follow me on LinkedIn, whichever you like. It's all
Hmm.
good. You can drop me a message and just say, "Hey Charles, just want to connect in case any roles come up." And
Yeah.
I can usually have a quick scan of your profile and tell immediately if I've got something for you at the moment. Like I said,
Yeah.
in America right now, I have very limited roles. The other thing I've got on my applicant tracking system and my client response manager is I've got a thing called a talent pool. So if you're happy to do so, you can upload your resume, you can add yours, and you don't have to fill in the 20 questions. It passes your resume and picks up all the data. Make sure that's all accurate and tweaked, and you can upload it. And I review my talent pool 3 times a week, and I constantly look at the last 2 weeks of talent pool. What that
Hmm.
also means you're searchable. So when I get new jobs, I've got a system that looks at
Perfect.
the job description, and so that's a great way. And what I've started refraining from doing is getting people to DM me their resume. I've never liked someone DMing me their resume. I prefer sending it by email because then I can preview it and it works better for me. Um, but but using the talent pool thing, that usually works well. And of course, if you go on my website, it's redherd, redherd.io. There's a jobs page. The website is busy being upgraded or updated right now. There's some stuff about agriculture there that I explored and never actually went into. There's a button there you can go. You can see all the jobs I'm recruiting for at the moment. Um, you're welcome to apply to any of those there. And then yeah, that's the main thing. I'm not so much on X anymore. I've got quite a few followers on X, but it's changed a lot for me. I joined Blue Sky, but I'm not uncommon there. LinkedIn, unfortunately, is my daily driver. I
Okay.
was saying to my wife about 2 months ago, I said my goal in the next 3 years is to do something that doesn't require me to use LinkedIn every single day of my life.
Hey, that's a measure of success, right?
Yeah.
So, before we wrap up, you got a fantastic case behind you, and
Thank you,
I know
thank you.
people watching this is probably thinking the same thing. It's like, hey, let's talk us through what you got on the shelf, because it's so intriguing and interesting. Because I see a Saturn V rocket, I see a shuttle, I see the
Yeah.
space station. So I know people that have watched to this point is probably saying, what is all that back there? So could you step us through some of the items you have there?
Yeah, it's all my junk. So as a kid, I had very good parents. I still have very good parents, but there wasn't a lot of money going around. So I didn't have a lot of Lego. So now that I've got big boy money, I can buy big boy toys.
Big
So I
boy
have a deal with
toys.
my wife. When I do a certain size deal, then I can buy myself a Lego. So I've got the Saturn V, which I actually saw in person at Cape Canaveral. My dad took me to America when I was about 13. Uh,
Nice.
the
That's one of
Apollo.
the best. It's one of the best.
Yeah, yeah. And
Next to
I still
Houston.
love the fact that the things you don't see inside, they still think about it. So inside the Saturn V, it's got the fuel tanks and the oxygen tanks inside, even though no one can see them. I've got the Apollo 11 lander. I got into photography in 2008 when I was in Afghanistan. I got the Space Shuttle Discovery, the Hubble telescope. I don't know what that Lego set's called. I think it's called. I call it Love is Love. I don't know which one that is. My daughter's unfortunately stolen three of the the hair pieces for her Lego collection. I've got the International Space Station, and then I got all my. I didn't have a lot of cars as a kid, but I got all my little die-cast airplanes. So that's all my die-cast airplanes. And then I got a trophy for boxing in the military. That's my beret. That's a rugby ball I have. And then I've got my McLaren Formula One car there. Yeah.
And you
And
got
you
a
asked me about the
Buccaneers
Buccaneer ball.
football there too.
Yeah, somewhere what is that? XXXMI?
Is
I
that
don't
their
know.
Super Bowl souvenir for the Super Bowl they won? I
I
know
don't
they won a Super
know.
Bowl several years ago. So
NFC champions 2002.
yeah, I think that was also the year they won
Yeah.
the Super Bowl. So
You
awesome,
know
man.
what? I think my dad bought that when we were in America, I think.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah, I was in
Yeah.
Florida, so yeah, that would have been the year they I
Yeah.
think won the Super Bowl. Well, thank you for sharing that. I know that was not expected, but it's
No,
such
no
an
worries.
intriguing cabinet, and I had to ask. Well, Charles, you've given so much of your time, and thank you so much for that. I'd like to give my guests the final word, and so with this is you can talk about anything. You can talk about what you got up, what you got going on this weekend. You can talk about recruiting. You can talk about tech, B-sides. Whatever you want to talk about, the floor is yours, sir.
Uh, it's an interesting one. I think the thing I've learned, especially over the last, definitely over the last 10 years, but over the last few weeks, is it costs nothing to be kind and it costs nothing to be helpful. And I've my whole life I've been I've strived to be a helpful person and be a selfless person. Um, and it's I don't find it hard to do. I think some people do struggle to do. And I think when you live your life to serve others, that's a great noble deed, but it's important to then also remember to look after oneself. I think myself and now with Remembrance Day passing recently, and I think in the US called you guys call it Veterans Day. Looking after mental health, especially men's mental health, is a critical thing. I spoke to two guys I served with them in the military recently that were on the ledge of something that
Mm.
is not good, and telling them and saying, "Hey, in the last 6 years, I've seen a therapist, I've seen a psychologist now, I've got a psychiatrist that helped me figure out that I've got ADHD, and I see them once a month, and it's the best money I spend." I think that's a big deal for me, and something that I've been reminded about over the last. It's been coming for years. My wife was the one that said, "Charlie, I really think you should seek help." And it's been some of the best. It's the best decision I made for myself. And I think, you know, it's very hard for people that always want to be helpful and help others to stop, pause, think about themselves for a minute. So I must say, I know it's a bit of a strange way to end it for you, but
No, it's
I think,
perfect.
sometimes, even as a husband or as a partner, um, to serve your partner as best you can, sometimes you do need to put yourself first and take care of, that gray stuff between your ears.
Wonderful and well said. Well, Charles, thank you so much for being on Top Cyber Pro podcast. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Appreciate it.